Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our monthly Dion webinar series. Today, I have with me our founder and CEO and three of our awesome coaches as we're here to discuss our executive coaches panel.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you everyone for taking some time out of your busy day to spend it with us. We have this webinar series to educate the learning and development community and leaders across the globe to provide some ideas and wisdom and some thought as you build your plans for the year. And every year we have had a coaches panel and have found this webinar to be such great feedback that we wanted to curate a new group of folks this year to talk about what's going on in the leadership coaching space and what coaching looks like and should look like in different organizations and give you some ideas. And today I'm joined with three of our coaches, Haley Dennis, Deborah Hunter, and Ken Keener. Thank you all for taking your time to spend an hour with us.
Steve?
Glad to be here.
Yes, happy to be here today.
So our format today will be, first, I'm going to lay some context about leadership coaching for those of you that might be new in the coaching space in terms of how Dion Leadership approaches leadership coaching. Then I will introduce our three coaches and really turn it over to them to spend most of our time having them talk through what happens in coaching sessions, what they're seeing, and some insights for you. We have some prepared questions that I will start with, but I would love for you to ask your questions throughout. I'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll kind of pivot as you have questions and make sure we end within an hour. Before we get going into the topic, for those of you that don't know Dion Leadership and what we do, we are a leadership and organizational development consulting firm, and we believe in providing powerful leadership solutions really through a team of extraordinary coaches and consultants. So today we have three of our 60 team members joining you, and we have a wide array of coaches that do this work. We really pride ourselves in doing a lot of thought leadership and winning a lot of awards in this space and trying to think about what's next and new and where's the world going. So as you can imagine, in this during COVID and post-COVID world, it's been a sandbox to play in around what happens in organizations from a leadership and OD perspective. And the areas we primarily spend our time in terms of supporting organizations is on the screen here. And you can see leadership coaching is one of our larger pieces. So we wanted to unpack that today. We also weave coaching into leadership development programs. We do a lot of training and high potential development programs. We work with executive teams. So maybe today we'll talk a little bit about teams in the context of coaching and assessing talent, organizational development, and then help you bring these tools into your organization. But as a leadership coaching firm that's been doing this for many, many years, I hope to think we can provide you some good insight as you think about coaching for your organization. And we'll be drawing from our client base. And you can see here, we work with lots of very large organizations. You know, we spend a lot of time in healthcare, in manufacturing, professional services, nonprofit organizations, but you can see we do, lots of different organizations, even consumer products, food companies, lots of different places that this work is. And we'll talk maybe a little bit today too about how does coaching look different if you're a large or small organization, or if you're in different industries. Does it or should it look different at all? So let's just talk for just a couple minutes about when we say leadership coaching, what do we mean by that? And in our viewpoint at Dion Leadership here, we believe that coaching is a lot about getting back to the mindset of a leader. So once a situation happens, it's, a person has a mindset or approach, they filter that information, they choose the behavior, and then they have an outcome. Without intentional mindset, maybe the behavior isn't the healthiest of behaviors, and it creates an outcome that you don't want. So we're not talking about consulting, we're not talking about necessarily mentoring or Therapy, this is really about leadership coaching in the context of what is your work or life situation? What are the mindsets that you need to bring to this job, given the culture that you have, so that you can have the healthiest of behaviors to achieve the outcomes that you want in your organization. And typical coaching engagements for us are around a new leader joining an organization or getting promoted into a next level role, somebody who may need to develop a specific strength, a specific skill that comes to us. It may be a leader that needs to enhance performance in a variety of areas and kind of pivot to a role that maybe now they're externally facing, they were internal before, or they're changing functions because they're on a high potential track. Or it may even be a leader that's just interested in coaching because the organization wants to motivate them to retain them in their company. We've done, actually this last year, we did a really great webinar you can check on our website on coaching for retention, particularly. In this case, we're going to talk a little bit about the landscape of coaching more holistically here. And then the coaching lanes that we work within are here. So we do executive level coaching, integration coaching, or that new leader integration, targeted kind of smaller coaching assignments. There are times where we'll do some things around talent fit, like we're not sure if this person belongs in this role or in the company, and an organization hires us to help figure out, what do we do in this situation? We're kind of all stuck. And then working with emerging leaders and kind of smaller size coaching programs to give feedback and development and get people on the right track. So today we'll talk a little bit about all these different coaching lanes, but primarily, at least in the work that the coaches on our panel today work within our context of our organization, it's mostly director, VP, C-suite level executives that we're coaching. And we use a standard process. So for us, coaching isn't just, hey, let's just start talking every week and see where this goes. It's about, being very clear about what are you trying to accomplish, the organization saying we're investing in coaching for a specific reason. And then we work through a series of steps you can see here. There's a foundation step, there's collect and assess some data. We can talk about that today as well if you have any questions about that. Plan and implement, and then really move into coaching. So we just don't start with, how you feeling today? What do we want to do? It really comes down back to that model we talked about what outcome are you trying to accomplish? And then when coaching is over, we even help support people in terms of a coaching digest and helping them sustain those gains after a period of time. So usually we're working with a coachee. Our coaches on the panel will talk a little bit more about this, somewhere between, at the minimum level, 4 months up to a year. It's not an ongoing relationship. Like, let's just keep coaching this person for 5 years as long as they want to true up. Our view of this is we shouldn't be a crutch in that particular case, but we should have a specific beginning and an end in mind. And then last, before we get into this, I wanted to share some of the outcomes of a coaching study that we do. So we have every year gone back and asked our previous coachees about their coaching experience. So I thought this could help you all as an audience member here kind of think about coaching in terms of what you accomplish in it, and then can tee up our conversations, and then looking forward to getting our team talking here. So this last year in our coaching study, we asked 163 coachees that have completed coaching over the previous 2 years to answer specific questions about how coaching has impacted their work and their job. And so I wanted to share with you that, over this 3-year study, you can see we have found that the coachees said that leadership coaching provided insight to help me perform better in their role. So almost every single person said, yes, coaching did improve my ability to perform in my job. Similarly, people say they are more equipped to utilize new behaviors in the workforce at a really high level as well. So as things are coming at me, as we change things, coaching is used many times to get people comfortable in that. And then this is a great kind of insight, I think, that coachees' overall well-being is improved. 81% of our coachees reported that because of the coaching process, to be able to focus on mindset and have more control, that they report that their overall stress, their focus, their health their levels of burnout have been improved because they are, more controlling their work. And happy to talk more about that. If you have any questions, again, feel free to use the chat. And then we do a net promoter score too. So for our coaching folks, we have said, would you recommend coaching to others now that you've gone through the experience? And our net promoter score is plus 68. For those of you that know how that goes, it's like goes from a minus 100 to a plus 100. So coaches become advocates. And when you coach a senior leader, they end up saying, gee, so-and-so on my team should get a coach. And then it creates a coaching culture because somebody sees it as not just a task to do, but something that was really informative. I thought you might want to see what coaches reported that they are working on. So this from 1 to 7, these were the development plan items that when we got into coaching and started to work this process, coaches said, this is what I'm working on. So everything from improving their ability to communicate all the way through increasing their emotional intelligence. And some of the things are a little bit more cognitive, like strategic thinking or some of the strategy items in a row. Some might be around, as you can see, managing up or executive presence. So it could be a wide array of items that a coachee needs to work on. And then the other thing that we found is I really think the secret sauce in coaching in general, kind of the overarching item, and I'd love to unpack this with our 3 coaches today in terms of how they get to this, is that it helps to remove that imposter syndrome. So someone that has more confidence in the work that they do. So they strongly agreed with this sort of statement about improving their overall confidence level as a leader to sort of step into the spotlight to do what they need to do in terms of leading others, having difficult conversations. And that's a large part of the value of coaching. And then to close, 69% of people in the last coaching study said that coaching actually impacted their desire to stay with the organization. So one of the things that we're finding is that some companies are investing in coaching for the purpose of engaging somebody to stay, not even because they need the performance improvement. There's an outcome that's a great outcome, of course, as well, but that it's about, I want to keep this person here where they have other choices. And then some of the verbatim comments in our last coaching study are on the screen here. If any of you want this coaching study, you're welcome to find it on our website, dionleadership.com. We have a full kind of white paper written about it. And we're getting ready. Actually, we start this in September each year. We're going to launch our next year's coaching study. So looking forward to seeing if anything changes in the way coaching unfolded in this kind of first full year, sort of post-pandemic life. So that's kind of where we've been as a large organization. Now I wanted to, kind of using that as a backdrop, turn it over to our 3 coaches to talk more sort of intimately about what happens in coaching, what are you seeing with the coachees that you guys have, and kind of dice it around a little bit. So to get started here, I just wanted to ask each coach to just give us, 2 minutes, a little bit of an introduction of your background and how you got into coaching. So Ken, why don't we start with you?
Good. Thank you, Steve. And hello, everyone. I'm really excited, glad to share some perspectives today and also continuously learn from Deborah and Haley's experience, and Steve, what you bring into this conversation as well. The way I found my way into coaching was on the heels of a 30-year corporate leadership career. The last 3 years as the Chief Human Resource Officer at NiSource, a $5 billion energy utility company. I found this as a very natural next step for me. Coaching fits like a glove in terms of my talents. When you ask those questions, like, what do you find yourself those days when you're in your zone, you're having an impact, you're feeling fulfilled, you get energy? For me, coaching is that. And my movement into coaching was more of a merge lane. As I did coaching internally, now to be able to do it for a couple of years externally has been super rewarding. And I think the reason I got into coaching, I was fortunate within my corporate career, I brokered executive coaching services for CEO succession preparation, high potential pool development, supporting leadership transitions. So I got a really good eye into what a great coach does actually, and what bad coaching can be too, from my own personal lessons of experience. But I've brought a lot of that into the coaching practice. In terms of unique perspectives, I think on the heels of watching Wimbledon over the weekend and the finals, a couple unique perspectives about coaching is coaching builds winning performance and capabilities. I think we're moving out of that era of having the stigma where you use coaching to fix someone broken before they leave. You won't find Alcaraz or Djokovic or any of the other players or any competitive athlete who's winning who doesn't have a coach along his or her side. And I think coaching can make a very big differentiating effect, especially, Steve, on the confidence that you referenced there too, which drives so much performance. The other unique perspective is that just as leadership doesn't happen in a vacuum, everybody can see the tennis players on the court, how they're performing, how they're doing. Worst kept secret when a leader struggles or when he or she succeeds. Neither does leadership development happen in a vacuum. And so I think engaging key stakeholders in the coaching process, even though it's a one-on-one relationship, paying attention to the critical involvement and support key stakeholders can play makes a big difference.
Great, Ken. Thanks for the introduction. Haley, you want to give us a little bit of background?
Sure. Thank you all. Glad to be here for this discussion today. I got into coaching by accident, you could say. I had worked in corporate, started working in corporate when I was in high school. So I had a long career in corporate, worked in finance, worked in tech. And I had a friend, she was attending a conference and she wasn't able to go, and she gave me the ticket. And it was a conference full of coaches. And so being immersed in that conference for the weekend was just amazing. Hearing the stories that the coaches shared, the impact, and just the joy they had of helping people really spoke to me. And I said, I want to do that. That's my next career move. I want to become a coach. And so I did my research, figured out how to get my certifications and all of that information. And so as I was going through that, I was talking to my mentor and I said, I don't know who to coach. So, it's so many different avenues of people you can coach and areas to go into. And she asked me the question, what have you done your whole life? And I said, well, I've worked in corporate my whole life. And she said, well, there you go. She said, all the experiences that you've learned and brought about and through your challenges and roadblocks and different things you've encountered, you can now take that information and that knowledge and experience and help others with their experience. And that's how I got into coaching. And so started doing it on the side a little bit. And eventually I left my corporate job and went into coaching full time. And it's been so rewarding, very similar to what Ken brought out, seeing the impact that coaching can have on an individual, seeing them accomplish their goals, being stuck, being able to get through those things, to really come out victorious, to build their confidence, to become a great leader. All those things are so fulfilling and the impact is just amazing. And so I love being able to say I'm a coach now. And, but back in the day working for corporate, you have those days where you don't want to get up, you don't want to go to work, right? But now it's like, I jump out of bed every day. I'm so excited. Who am I talking to today? What are their issues? What can I help them with? What are we going to talk about? And it's rewarding also because you really want to think about each individual person, because everyone's different. Everyone's journey is different. Their challenges are different. So being able to see how you can tap into their potential to help them to solve their problems or whatever their goals are with coaching to really help them to be able to do that is amazing. And so my unique perspective is really tapping into that person to help them realize their potential. Of course, as coaches, we don't tell them what to do. We help them figure it out. We give them guides and tools to help them to do that. And I love the power of silence. I know it's hard sometimes and most people don't like silence, right? But when you ask that question and you give them that silence to really think, and you can tell they're thinking, and then they come up with an answer or a question, it's so rewarding again, because again, they're tapping into their potential, they're tapping into themselves, and you're inspiring them, they're inspired, and then they can go out and inspire their team as well. So that's a little bit about me and my journey.
Thanks, Haley. And Deborah.
Hi, thanks everybody. Really great to be here. So my own journey is similar but different. I was a pretty young CEO and spent years building my company from about 8 million to about 100 million over time. And our work was in publishing. It was publishing leadership and training and development materials, as well as healthcare and some other fields. So I was super lucky as a CEO to be mentored by a lot of the great leadership gurus, people like Pat Lencioni and Jim Kouzes and Warren Bennis, and other people who were kind of over my shoulder. So I got that firsthand and got the experience of what it was like to have people who really asked you provocative questions and pushed you and questioned and thought. And when I sat back, and then I spent some time in the nonprofit world as well as a COO and chief strategy officer. But when I sat back and sort of looked at all of the things I'd done and what I was proud of, the thing that just stuck with me is I loved coaching and developing people. It was, I felt proud of all that we built and the books we published, but what I was most proud of was the people that we had developed over time who had gone on to roles in all sorts of other organizations. So I, like Haley, kind of wandered into it. I had some friends who were coaching and they said, you should do this, think about it. And I did begin doing it. And like, Ken and Haley, I just find enormous joy in the work. It feels like a great privilege to be let into people's lives, to be trusted with their confidence, to have people be willing to be vulnerable and tell me, what their pain is and what they're struggling with. And to help create that safe space to say, okay, here you can say anything, I'm not judging you. I'm not your boss. I'm not, but feel free to talk about what you need to talk about here. And, that sort of deep listening, I think, is really important to me, listening and really understanding the layers beneath what people are saying, what are the struggles that you're having and why. I think what's unique, I deeply believe that every leader needs practice. It's it's a lifetime amount of work. You don't get born to be a leader. It happens with practicing and listening and getting feedback, and it happens with deeply understanding who you are and having that sort of self-awareness and self-confidence and vulnerability to be able to help others and support others. I think I'm also, just as a publisher, I'm a huge believer in all the content that's out there. I've probably read hundreds of, probably thousands of leadership books and leadership content, and, which has made me think deeply about it. But there's a lot of ways to get, information these days, not just books, as we learned in the publishing industry. So I love bringing book ideas and others' ideas into the coaching as well. Like, oh, here's a model you should think about. That's a lot of fun for me.
Well, I'm so delighted to have all of you here, and I look forward to kind of our next phase of this hour here and talking a little bit more about what's going on in the world of coaching. But as we do this, I want to draw some things out, and for those listening in, I hope one of the things you just picked up with their introductions, which wasn't scripted at all, is that one of the things I believe in trying to run this organization is I look for coaches that are other focused. All three of these folks just said in their own way, I'm here to help this other person find this path and this journey. And I've interviewed plenty of coaches out there that have gone through an ICF certified coaching program, and they're about wanting themselves to feel better. Like, I'm going to tell this person how they should be and watch the journey I had as to why. And that just doesn't create a coaching relationship for any level of change. So I just wanted to just throw that in as I'm experiencing you guys right now, because I think that's really important as those of you that think about, how do we want to use coaching in our organization, or what does it need to look like? Or if I have an internal coaching practice, it's somebody who's comfortable in their own skin from what they've done, and they're at a place in their life where they're just about helping each person kind of, take that block of marble and find the sculpture that's inside that, if you will. So with that, Deborah, let's start with you. What are you seeing that's in the minds of coachees these days? How is it different than maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think, a couple of years ago, we were all struggling with COVID, and that became sort of the central place, central piece about building relationships at a distance. And I think it also just deeply tested us as leaders and as human beings too, going through that crisis. I would say now coming out of that, one of the things I see is that people are back to the basics in many ways. It's like, okay, how do we continue to, there's still some healing work that people are doing. How do I heal myself from what was a very, very difficult time? And how do I help heal my organization from what was a difficult time? But there's an awful lot of, oh my gosh, let's get back to it. Let's get back, let's get into it. A lot of organizations have been broken in certain ways, and people are having to do a tremendous amount of strategic work and business planning and thinking to mergers and acquisitions are coming up a lot, because the world has changed so much. A lot of organizations struggled. But I think, the basics are really there. People are now able to spend more time thinking about, okay, now that that has sort of passed, how do I build this team effectively? What do I do? How do I deal with the conflict that I see every day? How do I develop these people to be the very best they can be? All of those things. How do I create and articulate my vision more thoughtfully so that everybody wants to follow and we can really get where we need to go? And I think those basics, that are always there that leaders face are even stronger these days.
Awesome.
I think
Thank you.
I'll say one other thing, which is, one of the things that that I think we all felt during COVID was a tremendous amount of sort of fear and uncertainty. And I think people are still developing their confidence and their courage as well as leaders and working to develop that in others.
Haley or Ken, anything different that you're seeing from the coachees that you're working with?
Boy, building on Deborah's observation, I think there's a lot of back to basics in the midst of a different scenario. I think this notion of resetting expectations for workforce location, whether it's come back to the office, did we overswing the pendulum? I think every organization is trying to find their way. Do we mandate Tuesday, Wednesday, Fridays, or something like that? Leaders finding their own voice and what control do I have over that? And how do I engage a workforce that's been conditioned to have a different set of expectations? I think a number of the executives that I'm working with, even at the C-suite, say, I don't think I would have come up with this stance, but this is our stance. How do I lead in the midst of that and manage the tensions and trade-offs of where work gets done? And it puts even much more of a premium on what Deborah brought up about, boy, so much more is it essential to clarify vision, to manage performance well, to increase speed of feedback and some of those essentials.
I'll agree with both of you. I think I see fear has definitely come about a lot too, because of the changes and the things that are happening and trying to figure out things, restructuring, all those things. Companies going through layoffs, so many things like that. People are fearful for their job. They don't know what's going to happen next. So much change is happening that didn't happen before. How do we deal with that? How do we make everyone feel safe and secure? All those things come up. And so I think trust building has become so important between the teams, between leaders, and that goes back to that strategic vision and that planning and making sure everyone understands that. And also accountability comes up a lot too, because as you said, people are different, working from home, they're in the office. Are they working? Are they not working? How do you hold a person accountable? You don't want to micromanage, but you want to make sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So how do you manage all of those different things have definitely come up post-COVID that I've seen as well.
So Haley, can you kind of add to that in this back to the basics kind of situation here? How do you specifically, two things. One is, what exactly are you seeing in terms of this swimwear, how people are working? Like, how does that turn into a coaching objective? And maybe talk about how you coach for something within there, like time management needs to look different if you're in a virtual world, or navigating, people's personal needs today that weren't there before. Kind of get us maybe to something that's a little bit more like how you do it.
Yeah, I know, especially with leaders, there are meetings today. We hear so much from all that. We're in back-to-back meetings constantly, especially if you're, virtual. So it's like I hit end on one meeting and I'm going back into another one. And so that's been so hard for leaders to manage their time. They're in so many meetings. When do I have time to make sure everyone's doing well in the team, making sure I'm having my one-on-ones, making sure I have time for strategic planning, making sure I have time to eat lunch, just those simple things throughout the day that can help them. And so when we're coaching, I like to work with my clients on how are you spending your time? Do you have to go to every single meeting? Are you using delegation? Are you utilizing those people on your team that are high performers, those that want to do more? And so, of course, to know that goes into professional development. So knowing the members on your team, knowing what they want to do, then you can call on them and utilize them to help you. So by them being able to delegate some of the tasks to them, as a leader, you're able to then have more time to strategically plan for the team, strategically plan, think about the company, how the work is, your team is working together to accomplish those goals. And also thinking about yourself too. Don't forget that you need time for your own professional development, realizing that you have to take time to plan, and all of that is so important, or else that can lead to burnout, as we know. And also too, being able to lessen the reins. Sometimes we feel as a leader, we have to be in control. We have to be, leaders will come and say, I'm in the weeds. I know I'm in the weeds too much, but and that takes away from your own leadership, being able to have that time to plan, to do strategic thinking. And so all of those things, making a plan to realize, how can I delegate and do things that can help me to give me more time to then work on the leadership development, which is so important. Thinking about priorities too. Sometimes we may think everything's a priority, especially the fast pace of organizations today. It's a fire to put out every day. And that again takes away from being able to plan and do the work and work with your team. So having a good system set up within your team, being able to think about how we can focus again on people. As we talk about, of course, we have a lot of issues and personal challenges that can come up today. How do we deal with those? Before, everyone was in the office and we were able to see those things happening, and whatever needed to be done, people did. But today, we aren't able to always know what's going on with that individual. So as a leader, taking the time to have those conversations with your team, understand what they're doing. And so then when something's off with them or they need additional help, you're able to support them and help them with their personal needs. And that again is going to help them to continue to be able to take care of those needs and come back to work and be able to be part of the team as well.
I'm managing the chat here, and I might not make sure within our next half hour we get to everybody's questions, and I'll do them in order that seems to make sense. This one that just came in is probably aligned to what you just said, Haley. So specifically, as we're talking about the new way of working, how do you coach or challenge leaders who are out of sorts managing people virtually? And specifically, are leaders needing to have people on site? Are they, or are they letting that go? And how do you help them through how much of it is your own mindset of, I want life the way it used to be, versus, yeah, this job does require us to spend time in the office to collaborate, and where do those lines cross?
I actually have a leader that I dealt with that situation. And so some of their team wanted to come in, some of them wanted to stay virtual. And so they were stuck between kind of a rock and a hard place, because they were saying, how do I do this? How do I handle it? And so their leadership had left it up to each department to kind of figure it out and set those rules for the team. And so through our coaching engagement, we talked about what was most beneficial. One of the biggest things I always say is ask questions and talk to the team. So as a leader, talk to each individual, find out how do they work best. Where do they thrive more? Do they work better at home? Do they work better in the office? Some people work better when they're around others and they're able to collaborate around the team. Some people work better when they are alone or by themselves and have that time to think through things like that. So I would say really talk to their people and see what works best for them and come up with a solution that way. And you're, of course, not always going to please everybody. I know sometimes today we want to make sure everybody is going to be happy with the situation. Sometimes that may not always be the case. But if you can have that flexibility and adaptability, understand what matters most to each person and how they work best, and then set up a schedule to having people come in or work virtually for your team to see what works best for that.
Yeah, it's a real exploration. I can think of a director I was working with, and the question I put forward was, well, if they came back into the office, what would you as a leader be doing more of differently or better if they were on site? And then we explored, well, is there a way to do those things remotely? And if not, does the work demand more on-site presence, or are there, if it's not possible to execute the kind of leadership that's needed for their performance, maybe there is a good case to hold out for more on-site reporting. But typically, I think when we're earning our money, we're helping to explore different ways of thinking about the same challenges, to expand like the mindset, or to think what else could work.
Yeah, I would just add, I think you have to, and the leaders I see who are doing this really well are just going a level deeper. It's not, are you sitting in this chair, aren't you? It's, let's talk about accountability. How do we get that regardless of where we're sitting? Let's talk about productivity. How does that happen? And I think it's really important too. Let's talk about building relationships, which is critical for working together effectively, for a team and for colleagues to work together. And that has to happen. That is important. Some of the leaders I've seen that I admire are doing things like a home week. Is there a week or a chunk of time where the whole organization comes together and does some very intensive work together? Because in person, it does matter sometimes. You get more intimacy, more trust, more vulnerability sometimes when you're together in person, but maybe you don't have to do that every day.
Right. So outside of this topic, one of the first questions we had was, what are one of the most challenging situations in coaching that you face? So could somebody give an example of something that you think is a really, difficult situation that the organization or the coachee presented to you that you had to coach through? And it may be, we may have gotten to the successful outcome, or we may have realized that this person doesn't fit this organization because we couldn't cross it, but you were at least intentional in knowing what you could get or not out of the matching between the employee and the role in the organization.
I one client I'm thinking of who is more in the role of a general manager who owned P&L, there was a layering of new to the organization, very different culture, challenging, I'd say difficult direct leader that this client worked for, and then increasing performance demands. And it was like, wow, there's a lot of headwinds that the leader is stepping into. There's a lot of crosswinds that are throwing that leader off balance. And if it was just one, that would be plenty of challenge. We know we grow through stretch and duress many times. It was even more important to support that leader by helping, I'll just say her, take stock in what she brought to the table, to say, okay, let me do my own internal balance sheets as I'm addressing these things. What are my assets? What are my liabilities? And what is going to be most important for me to kind of address the ball when I'm swinging in the rough? I think where coaching helped her was to be, number one, you're not crazy. These are difficult challenges, and to almost validate or normalize this turbulence that any leader would be stretched to handle. But then number two is like, okay, let's find balance. And what is your consciously competent plan of attack? And doesn't mean the culture changed, doesn't mean the leader above her got better or anything else. But Steve, to that earlier point on coaching effects, the internal self-confidence helped her rise and step into and up to the occasion, exceeding performance targets, and honestly still rebounding a few times from some of those challenging setbacks when you're hitting culture and different operating norms that are still being adjusted to.
I'm thinking of one case where my first coaching session with somebody, she pretty much cried the whole time. It was like a very painful one. She was, had gotten into a real conflict with her boss. She had been chewed out for, various things, and she was really struggling. And that was maybe 8 months ago. And I met with her yesterday, and she was getting a huge promotion into the major corporate situation. And I think kind of the difference between then and now, I thought, where's this going to go when I first started? But the difference between then and now is, through that first situation, she did a lot of deep self-examination about, why did it bother me so much to be criticized? What do I need to learn from this? How can I understand what my boss really needs? I don't have to keep it all in. I don't have to be perfect, but I do have to communicate more effectively. So she really learned herself, with some prompting from me, but really it was all about all the work she did, is how to be more effective at her job and how to work more effectively with everyone around her. And I think some of that was letting go of her own perfectionism, letting go of like, I've got to be perfect all the time, and saying, being able to say, hey, I blew it, or I don't know how to do this sometimes to people.
Yeah, I think when I find challenging situations, a lot of them are usually people related in some way, shape, or form. And it comes to mind, I had one leader, or she had been in her organization for almost 15 years. But it was such a toxic environment. But she just kept trying to say, I can hang in there. I can survive. I can get through this. Or, I've been in it for this long. What's another 10 years? And so we coached, and it came back to that own self-reflection, self-awareness. And I knew right away when I first started coaching with her that she needed to go, but I couldn't tell her that. I didn't want to tell her what to do. But helping her, asking those questions, helping her to focus on what was most important for her in her career, what really mattered. And it's hard when a person has been in that. Even now, she did leave, and she found a job within a month, and it's so much better. The culture is so much more encouraging. She has so much more autonomy to do what she needs to do. The leaders are nice and supportive to each other. So she's in a great new situation. But as we're coaching still, those old traits and those old things still creep up because they've been a part of her for so long. And so we're continuing to fight through those challenges and push those roadblocks to the side so that she can continue to grow and to change her mindset that it is, I deserve better. And I do. I don't have to stay in a toxic environment, that there are better opportunities out there for her. So it was challenging, but the benefits in the end were so wonderful and great to see.
Great comments, everybody. I agree with you wholeheartedly. From where I sit, I would say that fractured relationships are the most challenging. And sometimes what's tough when we're setting up coaching assignment up front, from where I sit, even before it gets to you guys, is to say, does this person have the values to want to lean into what the organization needs of you? Are they open to trying a new approach or situation? And in some instances, I've honestly said, I don't know where this is going to go. And I've seen phenomenal changes like the ones that you guys have each mentioned about from a coachee's point of view, ones where, I have one example, a cardiac fellow who they don't want to lose, somebody who's in a, really critical job. There's 6 of them, and the relationship was so fractured that they had all these, complaints from nurses. They moved out of their office. They were working in a janitor's closet to try to not even engage with people. And you think, okay, are we already crossed some, magic line of like, you can't go back and this person can't be salvaged? And the person, through the coaching relationship had to do some hard looking, go, how did I react to everybody around this? And, then there's their view of it, right? Their stress, their job, their high achieverness, their family of origin stuff that just gets in the way. And then if they're willing to say, hey, folks, I need a do-over, I'm willing to kind of, say I'm sorry and get back into the flow, major changes can happen. And to the question on that also came in about, how do you show a return on investment for, an organization that's new to coaching that just says, how would I spend this much money on one person? I think we just gave you a lot of great examples of that. Like if you, could keep one person, frankly, that, would have otherwise left, that have some technical knowledge that the organization needs. They have strong customer relationships that the customers love them, but the internal people don't. If you could change that, I mean, you could probably in a short order be able to go, if we increase sales a 0.25%, it paid for this. If, the department leader has 10% less turnover on their staff of 50, it pays for itself. I mean, the amount of places of return of change, I think, is a big part. And then it's choosing the first coachee wisely, I think, for that organization. It's not starting with the person that everybody has pretty much said, we do not want them here. Like, that's not the first person you want to coach. It's maybe somebody that's either, hey, we are betting on this person to be the next X, but maybe they just don't have a lot of experiences in that and we can accelerate that. Or this person's in this kind of middle place where they, there's a ledger of a lot of strengths that they bring and some issues that create some havoc in the organization. And if we can remove one or two of those, and then be really mindful in that first coaching assignment to set up the coaching objectives. We help you do that of, where will we see it in the outcomes of your business? And then at the end with your senior leadership to have a closeout meeting that shows the return that, people are busy. You're like, okay, 9 months later, by the way, don't forget what this person was like or what was happening a year ago before we started this. And with the CFO or whoever's holding the purse strings to be able to show the value of that. I mean, that's usually where we start, is at one coaching assignment and trying to create a coaching culture from one coachee at a time. Okay, we got a lot more questions too. So let's get into, let me ask one or two more of our prepared questions, then I'll get back to our other ones, folks here. One of the things I really wanted to talk about today was this idea of coaching. How do you match you guys as coaches to the coaching situation or relationship? So for those, you can see we have male, female coaches on our panel here. We have different races, we have different ages. You heard them each coming from different industries. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about, we talked about this being real talk stuff. Like, so how much does it matter if the coach and coachee are like each other? Are they, is it better if they're not like each other? Is it dependent on the coaching objectives of the type of coach you should pick? I know from a Dionne leadership perspective, we always kind of do this intake and then offer a slate of 3 to 5 coaches for the coachee to select from. And based on those needs, most of the time we're trying to give as diverse of a slate as we can, but we leave it in the hands of the coachee to say, this is the person I'm going to be most comfortable with, versus saying, we think you should have somebody that's most like our CEO versus most like you. But I'd love your kind of place and point of view on that. Haley, you want to get us started?
Yes, definitely. I think it can go both ways. So I've had instances where, someone wants to coach with me because I'm a woman, or someone wants to coach with me because I'm a person of color. And a lot of that goes down to familiarity. So if someone wants to coach with me if they want a person of color, I'm able to understand their experiences because I've experienced them myself. So they're relatable. When I have clients like that, they'll tell me, you understand, I don't have to spend time, explaining those things to you. You get those things, or the biases or assumptions that they have to deal with. I've dealt with those. I have experience in those areas. So we're immediately able to get into the coaching a lot faster and get started. And I understand where they're coming from. When we look at leadership roles, there's still a lot of organizations are working on having more diverse individuals in those roles. So sometimes it's hard if a person is wanting to, they get to a C-level position. There may not be a person of color in that instance is in that role, or someone that they can tap into. So in that way, it may be beneficial for them to work with someone that's different from them, because then they can learn different things from that person in order to help them, because that person has been in that position. They can coach them through what it's like if they've been in that role. They have that experience. So I find it can be personal based sometimes. It can be experience based, industry based too. Coming from a financial background and a tech background, I find people that want to coach with me because of that, because I understand what that the everyday task and what those jobs are like. And so we're able to get deeper and I have a better understanding. So when you are getting started with that coach, the person may not always have to look like you, or it could be beneficial or not beneficial, but really understanding what is the goal that that person is coaching for. And then that can really help with the match of who they coach with.
Haley, I think a lot of the words you used, especially you hear that the client wants to be understood. You know, do you get me? Do you get my industry? Do you get my situation? Do you get my ethnicity? Do you get my challenges? And it's fair. One of the reasons I love Dion is that they believe in that chemistry interview process. It gives the client agency. And initially, I'm fortunate because I've worked across healthcare and aero defense and finance and all these other things. And I think initially it gives people a sense of comfort, or you get me. And here's my edgy, and it doesn't matter that I haven't been in your industry or that I haven't been in your shoes. If we understand what the coach's role is, a good coach is going to grasp context and make sure that he or she's coming alongside and meeting the client where he or she is. But when Deborah was talking about getting back to basics, those aren't unique to biotech or insurance or utilities. These are leadership challenges and needs that transcend industry. So in a way, I definitely will acknowledge the need for people to understand and feel connection, you know, and comfort. And then I love the diversity. You know, I was talking to a chair of a school of medicine just 2 days ago and was saying, well, yes, even though I do have background in your industry, there is benefit in a coach who's never been in your industry or has been in others to bring unique. It's the bigger picture of what diversity is and what it can bring to a leader's perspective.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I just think curiosity is so important as a coach, you know, and sort of, you know, being interested in and understanding, you know, the industry, the situation. And that's so basic, you know, that crosses all lines of age and color. You know, it's just like, wow. And I think most people who are coaches have that curious empathy, you know, and ability to draw people out, regardless of where you come from. Strangely, most of my clients are people of color. So, you know, I looked at that, and I think that may be indicative of where the world is right now, that there are an awful lot of emerging leaders of color in this world who are looking for coaching. But it feels like an honor to me. You know, I feel very, very honored to be trusted.
Well said, everybody. Thanks for that. Do you guys have any recommendations on, one of the questions was on types of publications or readings, speaking to your earlier comments about leadership books and things, to navigate the post-COVID work in organizations and organizational cultures? Are you reading anything these days? One of the questions was about to give to new or current leaders that can help them navigate this new world. As you're thinking, I guess I would say, anything I read right now from McKinsey, from Inc., from Fast Company, there's a lot of great articles out there of just tips and tricks and information. I don't know that there's any one book or author. I mean, if we were talking about like psychological safety or some sort of construct, you know, change, global, I think there's sort of people that have studied those pieces. But in this world, I think it's just being well read and getting on a lot of blogs and kind of hearing different people's point of view and kind of assimilating that for yourself.
Yeah, there is so much information. One particular author that I do like, though, is Brene Brown. And she has the Dare to Lead, all the leadership, being brave, being bold, being vulnerable as a leader. So I really like her book, and she has many on leadership that I've enjoyed reading, and a lot of my clients read as well that they enjoy.
I think we all kind of stuttered there with that pause, because you can talk about COVID, or you could talk about what is sound leadership. You know, the best leaders are versatile, you know, and they can manage across a lot of scenarios. There's a new book out by David Dodson, The Manager's Handbook. It's based on a lot of research and experience, and it's contemporary in the sense it recognizes, I won't say tips the hat, but acknowledges the new virtual work world and has some very concrete tips on leading in very impactful ways.
As a teaser, something we're doing, and you'll see at the end, I was going to say this, our next webinar is on leadership agility. And we specifically picked that topic because we are developing a new class and a point of view and a white paper on this idea of agility. Because as an organization that does this for a living, and we hear from these coaches and our facilitators on workshops, that we think that's the next important leadership skill beyond your kind of management fundamentals of delegation, accountability, conflict change, is agility. So we went out and looked at all these other authors and said, what are people saying about folks that are naturally agile, that can be at peace with that? And then they create a model and a point of view in a class, and that's a class that we're doing. So if this is of interest to any of you, kind of join this next webinar we're doing in about 2 months. We do one of these every other month, and we will be unpacking what we're learning of this agility space and what does it take for a leader in terms of mindset and skill set to be more agile. Do you guys have any other thoughts on, and we only have a few more minutes here. So what happens when a coaching situation gets stuck? How do you kind of unstick that if a coachee isn't engaged or involved? And do you have any other thoughts about what's coachable and what is not? I think we're going to have to end on those two questions. And I apologize if any of you asked a question I couldn't get to. I know there was one about mentoring, counseling, coaching model. I have one of those, and I can follow up with you on that. But let's close with this last question on kind of what's coachable and not, and what do you do when a coaching situation is stuck?
I'll start. I mean, with the stuck question, I think one of the things that I love about Dion's process in particular is that we develop a coaching action plan right at the beginning. And anytime you get stuck, what's helpful is just, let's go back to that. Let's look, have you made progress where you thought you would? How have the goals changed over time? There will be honestly whole months or, sessions that go by where we don't look at that plan because we're working more in the moment. But every time you come back to it, it reminds us of, oh yeah, this is what we're doing. This is the big picture.
I would scale that also. There's another question about what about in a session, when you're off track, or, in the broader scale. And just to repeat very briefly, it's all founded on those expectations. And then it's also in the assumption that the client, the person being coached, is in the driver's seat and just saying, here's where we started, here's where we are now. What do you want to do with this? We're not where we started, but where we are today, where do you want to go from here? So it's recognizing we don't have to necessarily push their nose back to it, but just bring attention to the difference and ask them where they want to go or what they want to do.
I couldn't agree more. As you said, client focused, and it's about the client. And usually if they've gotten off track, it's something that's happened and that's gotten them off track, whether in the session or in coaching in general, from their action plan. So I like to take that moment and really just give them that space to find out what's going on, what's blocking, what's come up for you that they hadn't maybe even realized that has got to become a blocker for them. And that's kind of getting them in that pause state or that stuck state at that moment.
Awesome.
To answer what's coachable and what isn't,
Yeah.
my feeling is almost everything is coachable, but the coachee has to really want to get there. They've got to be willing. They've got to be, willing to challenge themselves. They've got to be willing to do the work.
Yeah. Aside from IQ, which is not coachable, which is a predictor of performance, I think Deborah's spot on. It's not the focus area of coaching. It is the coachee or the client. It's to what degree do they have a learner's mindset? Are they open to change?
And I would say the last thing that I look for and see there is not just is the coachee able and willing, but does the organization support the person actually performing better or different? That their leader, many times the reason we're being asked to coach somebody is their leader, even though they're the executive sponsor, has gaps in their own leadership abilities. and they're not open for coaching. So it's a little bit of a dance in that. But I think it's always worth a try and a start and do a phase of it and see where you get. I think a lot of times you'd be surprised how much change you can make. Well, folks, we are at the top of the hour. We had 5 or 6 other fabulous, insightful questions that we did not get to. So tune in next year for that. I think we, well, hopefully this gave you some good insight. You can see in the chat our next webinar is there. Let me just close on that. It's September 26th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. If you have any other questions or want to follow up with any of our coaches, we will be sending out this webinar as a replay. Feel free to send it to others if you want to share that or reach out to any of us. And thanks again for spending some time with us today. And hopefully this helped you build a coaching culture at your organization. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Haley. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you.